Hi. So I worked, it is 11:31 a.m. on June 1st. I was out at work this morning, earlier this morning. I worked for a bit. Came back. It's been getting too hot later in the day to drive the car um, all day long, so I have to take breaks. But and I'm about to take a nap. But I need to talk about my divorces and my financial situation. Um, And I also need to disclose that my landlord was aware of my financial situation prior to my moving in. I did disclose to him prior to my applying to move in here some that I had, filed for bankruptcy and maybe filing for bankruptcy in the future. But at that particular point in time, the only thing I had to worry about was being sued. And his response was simply that he's had people sued before, so he didn't see a problem with it. Um, he may have thought I was someone else. And I need to let you guys know that my if you look me up online, there is what's called a my life profile. For me, it's mostly outdated and not actually true. In my case, it has my first husband listed as connected to me and his family, not my second husband, because I did not change my name for my second marriage. I kept I changed my name back immediately, and then I kept my name during my second marriage. So he doesn't show up on certain searches, I guess because there's limited shared public records. Um, my mom's final approximation of after 33 years with the same. I am not the one who was an internal auditor for Metropolitan Life. That is not me. That was her. I apologize for doing this so openly and publicly, but um, essentially, in the video I released in 2019, I mentioned how my mom had, when I was attending school, so the school that I chose, I had been given the opportunity to choose the school that I went to out of district. This is not something that is offered to many individuals. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to choose, but I know that many people can't or don't have that as an option. Anyway, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But basically, my mom, I don't know what she's been telling people for years about me. When I went to school, basically, I had very serious learning disabilities from a very young age that weren't monitored and should have been. As I attended a pediatric neurology clinic at St. Barnabas Children's Hospital in Lakewood, I think she said it was. I remember a lot of the visits. I remember the like the auditory visual tests. I remember the tests, but most of all, I remember playing with the balls, like that one toy in the office waiting room that's like the wooden blocks and balls on slides, and you like move them from one side to another and whatnot. I remember playing with that a lot as a child. I remember certain doctor's appointments, like I said, I was officially diagnosed at age 32 with hypermobility, but there was one point in time my hips were actually x-rayed as a child. I don't know why. I think my parents just said that, like, I don't know why my hips were x-rayed, but they were. And I was told not to sit with my legs crossed. That was not ever followed through because the teacher dismissed it because she didn't want me sitting in a chair and making all of the others, like, being above the other students. And I also preferred sitting on the floor. But that particular teacher actually questioned my mother in her judgment. And that particular teacher actually yelled at me and corrected me when I was the one to, she pronounced, I think there are two pronunciations, Aesop or Aesop. And I corrected her and did, like, I didn't correct her, but I think I said Aesop and she said Aesop, or I said Aesop. And anyway, so I remember her like screaming at me in the classroom about that. This teacher during a parent teacher conference actually challenged my mother and told my mom that it was entirely her fault for my learning disability because my mom was at work. My mom had chose to be a working woman. Shortly thereafter, my mom took a different position within the same company and switched job locations, and we moved. And they kind of sort of assumed I would grow out of the issues that I was dealing with. And then when I started having medical issues there was a lot of stuff I dismissed at home, like trouble swallowing, stomach pains, because my parents thought I ate too much, but I was likely developing ulcers, insomnia, issues with, I would have blackouts. I would have periods of I would be talking and sitting in a classroom and I would just black out. I would have issues hearing people, and the issue hearing continued for many years. And thankfully, it has not flared up in a while. But when it would occur, essentially, I would just have people they would have to repeat themselves because whatever they were saying, it would become garbled. Like I couldn't, my brain could not interpret the words that were coming out of their mouth. And it's important to know that when my mom was a kid, she went deaf for a period of a few weeks. On top of apparently she was in and out of hospitals for the majority of her childhood and had the opposite of leukemia, or what she told me. These are things that have not really been discussed, but that may have to do with abuse she went through. I don't know. Or medical experimentation. I don't know. I don't know anything about her childhood because she very seldomly talked about it because it was none of my business. Anyway, I'm on my medication right now. I'm just letting you guys know that. But basically, I would spend hours in pain on the floor with pain in my joints, and my parents would just dismiss it as growing pains. It was not. I would have when I would go to the nurse, I was told that I just wanted to be out of class. That's not true. I legitimately did not feel well. And at a certain point during my childhood, there may have been a lumbar puncture done that was lost, or the test results were lost. Something happened where they did not get the results of that lumbar puncture. And the results of that lumbar puncture could have changed my entire life. Not only that, but essentially when my mom went for an ultrasound because I had not been moving and she was concerned, her doctor was on vacation. This is what she's told me. And again, she has not told me. Now, I remember those doctor's visits. I remember all of my medical issues. Like, I have a very vivid memory. It's just when I'm in trauma, I don't remember things. Or when I'm dealing with a lot, I don't remember things. If I watch too much TV, I don't remember things. Become a zombie. It's one of the reasons why I stopped watching television. Sorry, I just lost my track of thought. She didn't tell me until 2017, after I spent a week in the cardiac care unit at Atlantic Care Hospital, because my pulse was jumping up to 160, 170 beats per minute, and I was having muscle spasms. Now, those same muscle spasms ended up developing into eventually when I temporarily moved in with her, which I moved in with her. Now, while I wrote on an Instagram account post that it was because of my health issues, that was because my medical and health issues were part of the reason why I just fled my marriage. And I couldn't make the best decisions for myself. That doesn't necessarily mean that the best decision was made. I had looked for help from people around me. The people in my friend group themselves, many of them not married, many of them not been through divorces. My parents not the most supportive of me as an individual because they are themselves conservative Christians. So my father may be a little different. I don't know him anymore. He moved away. But anyway, and then, when I moved anyway, sorry, I entirely lost my train of thought there. And again, I am on my medication, so I do apologize. But I did have a tendency of losing my train of thought a lot as a child. And it should be known that for a while I was on phenobarbital during my early developmental stages. And then once I got out of those early developmental stages, I was, off of it. But I, still had developmental issues that I just had normalized because it's anyway. Um, why am I mentioning this? I have for the majority of my life over-explained things, and I've over-explained, or for a while I would over-explain things because I knew I had issues with communication. Because anytime as a child I would try and communicate, I was shut down. I was dismissed and I was shut down essentially. So I just learned to shut up, and it's just me as myself. That is what my mom. She just doesn't like me. She was very supportive. There were certain points in time where she has been very supportive, and I'm not saying she hasn't been supportive. Like she got into a car accident getting me supplies to try and apply for face off at one point when I moved home from Toronto. I feel awful that she got into a car accident, but she has put her life at risk for me. I'm not saying that's not true. I'm saying that she may have unaddressed issues herself stemming from repression from childhood trauma, repression due to her religious and political beliefs, repression due to her whatever's going on with her health. There could be, she has detached so much because she has herself taken it to say, let go and let God. And I'm not saying that that's not good for certain situations, but if that's what you do with everything and you just kind of forget from the moment something happens, like that it happens, but you just don't think about the consequences, that's not good. Now, I have tried to have conversations with her in the past, and just been dismissed. And at one point, while I was still married to my ex-husband, I had started to talk with her about something that bothered both of us, but he had specifically said it. So I started off talking to her, and saying, John had mentioned he doesn't really like when you do this to him. And her response was, I'm not going to change. How dare you ask me to change myself? Like, not necessarily to that extent, but there was a lot of emotion and there was some body language, and she was offended. So if I'm, overemphasizing, I apologize. That's not the intent. But it's important to understand how she reacted. Why am I saying this? Because it's important. When we just simply read text conversations, we make assumptions based off of how we ourselves are feeling, or what we project the other person may be feeling at that point in time. I'm saying that because of a lot of the text messages and instant messages and things that I exchanged with certain individuals, some of whom have never met me before and did not fully understand what was going on in my life at the time that we met, or what led up to that particular moment in time. Anyway, neither of my parents, maybe they do believe in certain things, I don't know, but neither of my parents seem to believe that I have certain rights. They also seem to think I'm a very different person, and I've just allowed them to think that I'm a very different person. I'm going to take my glasses off. I've allowed them to think that I'm a very different person, and it's because it's how I developed my ability to survive. The issue, I ended up detaining at age 18, and then sorry, the house is not very happy with me right now. I think I mentioned the house, that my house is haunted. I heard they said something negative, and then the connection went unstable, so I apologize. I don't remember what I was saying either, but I think that might have been the point. Regardless, this was never meant to be about me and my mom. I had worked through my shit. I was continuing to work through my shit. It's just that she doesn't believe in what I like. If she's not herself involved and knowing of every single tiny little detail, it doesn't exist. At least that is how I have experienced my life. Now my marriages, again, I didn't disclose things to her. I just but I did talk to her about certain things. But the thing is that her husband is a misogynistic, anti-Semitic, racist individual who she does not know. She met him on eHarmony. They went out on a date, and then I think it was one date, maybe two dates, and then he came to the house. And then the third time, at least she told me she knew she loved him on the third date. Um, and I told her I had expressed concern about the speed at which they were moving, and she again, how dare you? You don't know anything about me. You're my daughter. It's none of your business. So this was not meant to be about my mom, and I've called this kind of behavior a tantrum, and I think that might be like, I don't know if that's what it is, but that's the best way to describe it. Um, when I moved, she was, almost 70. I think I said she was 70. She was almost 70. Um, she spent the years prior to meeting and after meeting her husband in and out of court. I don't know if she was starting to, at any point in time, like regress to where she was when she first met him, or just is in general having memory issues. I don't know. But at a certain point in time, I was dealing with the ghosts in this house and being harassed by her, stalked by her, and several other people at the same time for reasons that I do not know. And some weird messages got sent because there were a lot of things going on all at once. Um, I am terrified because I don't know what my mom has been telling people for years, and she's very well connected through social media. But the thing is, those people in social media and many of the people she's met and know in person, they don't know her because they haven't lived with her. There is a difference, and a lot of people tend to not everyone, but many people tend to forget that. Or just dismiss it and just kind of deal with it and don't necessarily think about the big picture. Now, I myself I am more liberal. I wouldn't say I'm like to the far one extreme or another, but I she and her husband may see me as the enemy. I don't know. I had asked when I moved in if I would be safe when I brought out a Bernie Sanders mug. I was told yes, that they respect everyone regardless of their, beliefs, and then immediately started quoting misinformation about Bernie's wife. Um, I had started noticing issues with their church group meetings that they were having at the house. Not necessarily. I call them issues because it's just blatant racism, and it was on behalf of, it was everyone. It was everyone involved in the meeting. Not so much my mother, and what she said she may not have intended, and her husband at that point he made. I'm not going to comment on what he said, but essentially, people have a right to know this, and if they know it and are simply dismissing it and not understanding what the consequences are for their children, who are watching their parents make this decision consciously and then often telling their children to do other things. Like, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it because I had kind of thought that it best be left to the congregation to make that choice. But there were a lot of things all going at once. And I think a lot of people misunderstand me. Um, anyway, I don't remember what. I'm sorry. I'm on my medication and it's starting to like really hit me, so I do apologize. Um, one of the things I mentioned. I'm going to talk about my divorce. But one of the things I mentioned in of the video about alternative schools was that my mom had joined NAMI as a way to cope with my attending an alternative school and my being on antidepressants. Now, she didn't have to deal very much with anything, because I was so terrified of her, I simply stayed in my room. I spent most of my time reading and on the internet talking to strangers. Often, on Fridays, I would go to the firehouse where there were concerts with local bands. But that's because certain friends that my parents liked were there. But that was pretty much it. Um, my I did go and hang out with friends from time to time, but primarily I spent time by myself. And then whenever my mom wanted to do things, it was Christian related. And my dad's response was simply to just, do whatever my mom wanted to make her happy. Um, and she did do things with me. Like she took me to, I had wanted to be a model, and she would take me to modeling casting calls. But then she would use them to shame me, and ask the talent scout, whether or not they recommended a tattoo. If I would get work with a tattoo, because I wanted to have a tattoo one day, and would they hire someone who would get a tattoo? Because wouldn't that make them less employable? Um, Maybe not again to that extreme, but still with that emphasis. Um, like there are a lot of people in this country who seem to have forgotten that we have not really been at this point in history. And many of them are kind of flashing back to when they were happiest or certain points in time. Um, like I had briefly stayed at someone's house, the home of a former childhood friend who I mentioned in that video about schools, who I didn't fully understand what was going on with her at that moment, and I would not have asked her to share her story had I understood, but it was very kind of her to do so. I had been staying at her home, her mother's home. I did not know there was an Alexa in the house, but I found out because when I came into the house one night after work, she and her husband were watching a World War II, or I'm sorry, a 9/11 documentary. And her husband probably 6, 7, 8 times asked Alexa how many people died in 9/11. And a lot of people forget that the algorithms and AI and technology and stuff, they keep track of things like this. Um, Now, it is terrifying to consider that, but it's also important to understand that he has Alzheimer's. Um, but she also, I'm not gonna. That's not my business. It is important to talk about um, the algorithm bit there, um, because many of us forget that algorithms shape our lives, um, and that's because it's newer to our lives. Though it's been around for a little while at this point. Um, I am one of the few people who does not watch television, who does not really watch podcasts. I don't really use the internet. I go to work, I come home, I eat, and I sleep. That's how I was. I had been at work, and I would take momentary breaks to look at my phone. First off, because I was told that I could. But secondly, because I needed to because of my ADHD issues, which really seem to flare up when I use computers. Um, Now, I'm not normally one to use my phone much, but when I was married to my husband, my second husband, towards the end of our marriage, I did have an issue. Like, not that I had an issue, but I did use my phone a lot, and it was primarily to avoid him because I was trying to reintegrate myself into society and I was trying to relearn social skills. And it was one of the things that made him angry was that I was trying to be social and I wanted to have people in my life. Now, he would tell me that he couldn't tell me no, but deep in his heart, he would start to harbor this anger, and he didn't believe in communication. What he believed in was getting as angry as possible and then exploding at the very last second, and he would think that was an acceptable response. Um, Now, for those who know him, he quit drinking for the duration of our marriage. We did not drink. I don't drink to begin with. I think we maybe had 5 drinks together over the course of the 3 years. He like, maybe I'd have, like, a sip of something if he had it, but I very rarely drank. Um, I have to say that because I don't know what he was like prior to 2014. We had kept in contact via instant messenger. We did not actually know each other. We were not in each other's lives. I was not there. I do not know what his previous relationships were like, but I do know that an ex of his started to stalk me while I was living in Canada and created a fake Facebook page to do so. I also know that when I moved home from Canada and was diagnosed with cancer, while he was still dating her, he suggested that we get married so I go on his insurance. I declined him. Now, the only reason I was home from Canada at all was because of the fact that an ex we reconnected. Oh, I do not know if any of that. So I don't know